18 minutes after 8 o'clock this Monday morning. A warm welcome to you if you're just tuning in. You're with the AM report. So more than 5,400 carjackings were reported in the period between October and December last year. This latest data from the SAPS represents a 13.8% increase, which is the largest in the category of vehicle-related crimes compared to the same time in 2020. Now, the Gauteng province experiences the most vehicle crimes, followed by KZN and then the Western Cape. Let's bring in Netstar's Chief Technology Officer, Clifford de Wit, who joins us for some analysis on these incredibly disturbing numbers. Clifford, when I first read that number around carjackings, 5,400, I thought it was for the year, but actually no, it's for 3 months last year.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it certainly is a disturbing statistic, and we, as much as we follow the official numbers, we also obviously track our own numbers, and we certainly see the correlation in terms of what we see and what was officially announced. I think it obviously speaks to some of the situations we're seeing in the country, but I guess more concerning what we're seeing is that some of these hijackings now concern taking people. Before we would see that many motorists were simply discarded. But we see lately, just because of the advent of some of the different changes, that in many cases, certainly on the commercial side, they're taking some of the drivers with them until they're able to either collect the vehicle or take the cargo that's in the vehicle.
So how much of these carjackings are just carjackings versus how many of them involve violence against the occupants?
Those stats we don't really have a good hand on. I mean, I think we do rely on the official statistics to say that. But obviously, us being a vehicle recovery business, in many cases, we get there to find the vehicle. We obviously get stories related to us, but we don't track the actual incidents of violence versus simple hijackings.
Okay.
I think we rely on the authorities to give us that point of view.
Right.
But certainly, anecdotally, we are seeing the kidnapping side, if I can use those words, certainly grow, which obviously is concerning.
Yeah. So carjacking, hijacking, turning into a kidnapping. You've given us a sense of why that's the case, but tell us again, in what case, in what instance does it turn into a kidnapping versus just getting the car?
Yeah, so look, if we look at the cases of when this is happening, I mean, certainly, if we look at the incidents, our data shows us that most of the hijackings in our user base tends to happen sort of late afternoons and early morning. Late afternoons, often when people are letting their guard down, when they're coming home from work, then maybe not paying attention. And then I think it depends on the reaction in the situation. We find that most cases where people comply with the hijackers, that the situations don't escalate. So certainly our advice to our motorists is that, first of all, be on your guard, especially when you think you shouldn't be. So if there's something suspicious, make sure that you note it. Make sure that if you do have a security company, call them. Rather err on the side of caution and keep your guard up in those difficult situations. And then if something does happen, please don't be a hero. Try and comply with them, and then normally situations don't escalate.
So some good advice there. I want to ask you about the provinces that are the most to blame for this increase in carjackings. We've got Gauteng, which tops the list, then KZN, then the Western Cape. What makes Gauteng such an area of such a popular area, shall we say?
Yeah, it's hard to relate directly. I mean, that's certainly, we obviously see the same correlation in our statistics. We do think it's probably got to do with, the population of the provinces. So we certainly think the density is probably got something to do with it. We think the access for criminals to get away and get to places where many of these vehicles can be disposed has got something to do with it. But also, I think, if we look in our statistics, criminals are sort of targeting the entry-level vehicles. So we see a lot of sort of lower value vehicles. I don't think there is such a thing as a low-value vehicle these days. Yeah. But let's call it the entry-level vehicles they tend to be targeting. And I guess we see a large population of that in those two provinces. So there is some correlation. But I think it's probably density that is probably one of the bigger drivers. And we do, in those provinces, if you sort of zoom into those provinces, we do see the most incidents in the metropolitan area. So it's not in the outlying rural areas that we see the high incidents. We do see it in the high density areas.
That's very interesting, isn't it, Clifford? That they would be targeting entry-level vehicles.
Yeah, so our lower value vehicles, the VW Polos, the entry type vehicles are the ones where we see the most type of most type of hijackings in our statistics. So that the higher value vehicles, although they are taken, tend not to sort of dominate the numbers in terms of what we see in our user base.
Yeah, in fact, we're showing our viewers some CCTV footage while we're in discussion with you. Incredibly scary footage. What appears to be someone driving into their driveway. So the security gate opens, the person drives in, and as the security gate starts to close, a vehicle pulls up in front and they stop the gate from opening, and the hijacking continues. You've alluded to some advice that you can give us insofar as, how to be on alert, what to do in particular situations. But, I mean, those are far-reaching, aren't they? Going into your driveway for one, going into your home or leaving your home. What's the advice there?
Yeah, again, I mean, I guess, and this is why criminals tend to prey at people's homes, because, they always say that the most number of accidents happen 2 or 3 kilometers from your home. It's because when you're starting to feel comfortable, you know your neighborhood, you know what's going on, and you're typically not paying as much attention as you would when you're not in your comfort zone. So I guess our advice there really is just be super careful when you're leaving, and especially when you're entering, because the soft spots are when you've come to a stop, either in your own driveway or somewhere at a traffic light or entering a highway. And that's when many of these happen. It's very hard to hijack a moving vehicle. Of course, there's a whole different class of hijackings that happen in that situation.
Yeah.
So again, our advice really is pay attention. If there's something that feels wrong, do something about it. Don't pull into your driveway if you suspect somebody's following you. If you see that suspicious vehicle parked in your street, rather do a turn around the block and see if it's still there. Call the security company if you're privileged enough to have one. Get an escort home if you really are feeling uncomfortable. It's uncanny. Often we will speak to victims of these crimes, and they'll say, I knew there was something going on. My gut feel told me there was something going on, but I chose to ignore it.
Yeah.
So I think just trust your gut. Make sure that you're keeping your guard up. And if there's something wrong, don't enter and stop. Rather keep moving. Yeah,
absolutely. Some good advice there. Just as we wrap up our interview, Clifford, are there drivers that are more vulnerable than others?
That's a great question, and something that we've tried to work out. We've looked at the massive amount of data that Netstar keeps to try and provide our drivers and our customers with better guidance. We do notice sort of a correlation of certain hotspots. So to answer your question, I think if you are traversing, known hijacking hotspots, your probability of getting hijacked, it sounds obvious, definitely goes up. Mm-hmm. And so we do advise our drivers to sort of avoid known hotspots because, that may just be that one chance that happens. That being said, we don't really see that much correlation between individuals or their driving styles and their propensity to be hijacked. So I can't say that if you're a mom and you're taking your kids to school, you've got a higher probability than somebody simply going to the office. We don't see that correlation in our data.
Yeah, incredibly worrying statistics, certainly, Clifford. And I said it was my last question, but this will be it, I promise. In terms of interventions in the security sector, government releases these crime statistics every quarter. Is there a specific plan, to your knowledge, around targeting this sector of crime in our country?
We obviously actively work with the SAPS and certainly our insurance and our insure telematic partners as Netstar to try and provide certainly insight into the data. We also actively work with them on sort of the areas where we think we could prevent some of it. So I guess a good example of that is the use of car jammers. We've also noticed above the hijacking, also noticed a lot of sort of incidental crimes around jamming people's vehicles and gaining access to them, whether it's at schools or at malls. And so we're working with authorities to try and figure out, where these things are stolen or where these things are bought and how they're used, so we can stem the flow of it into the open market. we're obviously not directly a crime prevention organization. Our business is primarily around securing people, providing advice, and retrieving their vehicles if need be. So I guess our role here is to work as a community, provide insight to our stakeholders and help everybody, I guess, prevent this in the long run.
Yeah, certainly. Clifford de Wit, let me thank you for your time this morning. He's Netstar's Chief Technology Officer. Incredibly worrying statistics revealed in terms of car hijackings in the last 3 months of last year, an increase of 13.8%. Still ahead for you this morning on the program, Newzroom Afrika is back to hosting in-person gatherings